Look at your garden when the porch thermometer hits 95 degrees. The lavender by the path is still open. The tomato leaves are hanging low. The hose is warm where it lies across the grass, but the bees are gone. Most people look at those empty flowers and think the bees are finished for the day. They think the garden stopped being useful, or the bees simply moved on, or the heat made them lazy. They are wrong. The bees have not stopped working. They may have changed jobs. This is what bees do when your garden hits 95 degrees, and what happens next can decide whether the hive near your garden gets through the heat without losing control of its own living center. By the end of this, you will know what to watch for the next time your flowers go quiet in the hottest hour, why some bees leave the blossoms and start hunting for water, and why the final sign may be happening on the outside wall of the hive, where most people never think to look. Number 1. The empty flowers do not mean the work has stopped. They mean the math of the day has changed. In the cool morning, your garden can look like a bee city. One bee on the lavender, another in the clover, a bumblebee pushing deep into a squash blossom, a honeybee working low between tomato leaves, almost hidden unless the sun catches her wings. Then the afternoon arrives, the air gets heavier, the soil throws heat back into your face. The same flower bed near the fence is still there, but suddenly it feels empty. Most people see that and assume the flowers are no longer important. Sometimes that is partly true. Heat can change nectar, it can dry shallow flowers faster, it can make certain blooms less rewarding during the hottest part of the day. A bee that found your garden useful at 8 in the morning may not find the same reward at 2 in the afternoon. But there is another reason, and it matters more. For a honeybee colony, a hot afternoon is not just a foraging problem. It is a hive problem. The bee on your flowers does not live alone. She belongs to a colony with brood, wax, stored food, and thousands of bodies packed inside one space. When the outside temperature rises, the inside of the hive can become a dangerous place to mismanage. So some bees stop acting like shoppers moving from flower to flower. They start acting like emergency workers. The flower is no longer the only priority. The hive is. Sign number 2. Some bees switch from collecting nectar to collecting water. This is one of the most misunderstood things people see in summer. A bee appears near a wet stone, a muddy patch under a dripping hose, the edge of a bird bath, or the damp soil beside a flower pot. She is not drinking the way you drink after working outside. She may be carrying water home as a tool. The first time I really noticed this, it was not at a flower. It was beside a shallow dish near a clay pot, the kind of small thing you almost forget is there. The flowers were quiet. The air felt too hot to stand in. But one bee kept returning to the wet edge of that dish. She did not look like the center of anything. That was the point. A lot of important bee behavior does not look important while it is happening. Honeybees can use water as part of hive cooling. A water-carrying bee brings tiny amounts back to the colony. Other bees can spread that water in thin films or droplets. Then fanning bees move air across it. The simple version is this: water plus moving air can pull heat away. In your garden, that entire system may begin with one bee standing at the wet edge of a cracked saucer under a pot. She does not know you. She does not know that the dish is beside your back step or that you filled it yesterday. But she may learn that this damp place exists, and on a 95-degree day, that may matter more than the prettiest flower in the yard. Behavior number 3. The hive turns thousands of wings into a ventilation system. If you could look at the hive entrance on a hot day, you might see bees facing one direction, bodies braced, wings moving so fast they blur. They are not trying to fly, they are moving air. This is called fanning, and it is one of the clearest signs that the colony is not passively enduring heat. It is actively fighting it. A crowded hive produces heat. Bees have bodies. Brood needs a stable environment. Wax can soften when conditions get too warm. Air that sits still becomes a problem, so workers create airflow. Some fan at the entrance, some fan inside. Some help pull warm air out. Some help move cooler air through. The colony becomes less like a pile of insects and more like a living ventilation system. And here is what makes it strange. No single bee understands the whole system. The bee at the entrance does not need a blueprint. The bee carrying water does not need to know the full temperature of the brood nest. The bee inside the darkness does not need to see your garden at all. Each bee responds to what is happening around her, and the result can look like engineering. You thought the bees left your flowers because the garden was less interesting. They may have left because the hive became more urgent. But moving air is only half the battle. If the hive is still packed with warm bodies, the colony has to solve a second problem. Not just how to move heat out, but how to stop making so much heat inside. Number 4. The bees hanging outside the hive may not be preparing to swarm. This is the sign many people misread. On a very hot day, you might see a cluster of bees hanging on the outside of a hive, spreading across the front like a living beard. If you have ever seen a photo of this, it can look alarming. A dark mass of bees outside the entrance, thousands of bodies crowded together. It looks like the colony is about to leave. Sometimes bees do swarm. But in heat, this behavior is often something else. It is called bearding. Think of it like a crowded house on a summer night. If every room is full of warm bodies, sometimes the first thing that helps is not a stronger fan. It is opening space. Some bees step outside so the rooms inside can breathe. That is what bearding can do for the hive. Their bodies produce heat. If too many bees stay packed inside during a hot afternoon, the colony has a harder time keeping the internal space controlled. By hanging outside, they remove some of that body heat from the hive and help the interior stay manageable. So the bees on the outside may not be abandoning the colony, they may be protecting it. That is the reversal. What looks like panic may be temperature control. What looks like a colony spilling out may be a colony making room for the bees still working inside. And if you have ever seen bees hanging outside a hive on a hot day, tell me in the comments what it looked like. Was it a small patch near the entrance, a thick beard across the front, or just a few bees gathered in the shade? What time of day did you notice it, and what was the weather like? Number 5. The quiet flowers can tell you where the heat is winning. The next time your garden hits 95 degrees, do not only ask, where did the bees go? Ask which flowers they abandoned first. This is where your garden becomes a map. The open flowers in direct sun may empty out before the shaded ones. The lavender by the path may go quiet, while the clover closer to damp grass still gets visits. The squash blossom that looked full in the morning may be ignored by afternoon because the reward has changed. Bees are not visiting flowers for beauty. They are measuring value with their bodies. They respond to scent, sugar, moisture, distance, memory, competition, and heat. A flower that looks perfect to you may be, in that hour, less useful to them than a smaller bloom near shade. This is why a hot garden can look confusing. The flowers are still open, the color is still there. Your eyes say the garden is available. The bees may disagree, and that is useful to notice. Watch whether the same patch gets busy again when the sun drops. Watch whether bees return to the lower flowers first, the ones shaded by leaves or a fence. Watch whether the buzzing comes back at the cooler edge of evening. The garden did not stop mattering. The timing changed. Number 6. The hottest hour can rewrite the bee's route through your garden. A bee route is not a straight habit that never changes. It is a living calculation. In the morning, a honeybee may work the lavender, cross to the clover, check the basil flowers, and return to the hive with a pattern that makes sense. The air is cooler, the flowers are more rewarding, the flight costs less. But by afternoon, that same route may no longer be worth the price. The lavender may be too exposed. The tomato bed may hold too much heat. The open patch near the fence may become a place to pass over instead of a place to land. Meanwhile, a shaded corner, a damp edge near the hose, or a flower protected by leaves may become more valuable than it looked in the morning. The bee is not thinking through this the way you would. She is responding. Her body is measuring the day. Her memory is adjusting to the reward. her colony's needs are changing behind her. That is why one of the best things you can watch for is not simply whether bees appear, but when they appear. Look early, look late. Then compare that to the empty hour in the middle. A garden that seems ignored at noon may be part of a route before breakfast and again before sunset. If you only watch during the hottest hour, you may think the bees rejected your flowers. They may not have rejected them. They may be waiting for the garden to become worth the cost again. Number 7. Heat changes how bees use their own bodies. A bee is small, but heat still has to move through her. When the air is mild, flight is expensive but manageable. She leaves the hive, visits flowers, returns, unloads, and goes out again. On a hot day, that same trip costs more. Flying muscles generate heat. Landing on hot surfaces adds stress. Open sun changes the risk of staying too long on one flower. So bees adjust. Some forage earlier. Some shift to shaded patches. Some reduce the time they spend exposed. Some return to the hive and take on different work. Some gather water. Some fan. Some stand outside the hive to reduce crowding. And some simply vanish from the part of the garden you were watching. Not because they are gone from the system, because the system has rearranged itself around heat. That is why the empty afternoon garden can fool you. You are looking at one layer. The colony is managing several. There is the flower layer, where bees search for nectar and pollen. There is the water layer, where bees gather cooling material. There is the entrance layer, where fanning and bearding may happen. There is the dark inner layer, where brood, wax, and stored food must stay protected. Most people only see the first layer. Hot weather reveals the others. Number 8. The final sign may happen after the sun starts going down. This is the one many gardeners miss. At 2 in the afternoon, your garden may look abandoned. At 4, may be still quiet. You check once, decide the bees are gone, and stop paying attention. But then the light changes. The tomato leaves stop hanging quite so low. The lavender is no longer burning in direct sun. The air near the fence cools a little. The shade from the house stretches across the flower bed. And suddenly, one bee appears. Then another. A bumblebee drops into a blossom with a heavier sound. A honeybee returns to a patch she ignored for hours. A small bee works low where you would not have looked if the garden had not gone quiet first. This late return matters. It tells you the absence was not always rejection. Sometimes it was timing. Sometimes the garden was useful in the morning, too costly in the afternoon, and useful again when the heat broke. That is the delayed payoff in a hot garden. The story does not end when the bees disappear. It continues when they decide the garden is worth coming back to. And if you want one thing to watch for next time, watch the edges of the day. Look early, look late. Listen for the difference. A garden that feels empty at noon may be alive before breakfast and again before sunset. The bees may not be gone. You may simply be watching at the wrong hour. Number 9. The hive is spending energy to protect tomorrow. This is the deeper part. The bees fanning at the entrance are not just cooling themselves. The water carriers are not just thirsty. The bees hanging outside are not just resting in a strange pile. All of that work protects what comes next. Inside the hive are young bees that will not visit your flowers for days or weeks. There is stored food that took thousands of trips to gather. There is wax that workers built from their own bodies. There is a queen whose eggs become the future workforce. There are larvae that cannot walk away from the heat and find shade. So when your garden hits 95 degrees, the colony is not only reacting to discomfort, it is defending continuity. That is why the hottest part of the afternoon matters. Not because it makes a good dramatic scene, but because it shows you what a bee colony really is. Not a crowd, not a machine, not a simple collection of insects. A living system trying to keep the next generation alive. And somewhere in that system may be a bee that left your lavender, skipped your tomato flower, found a wet patch near the hose, and carried back a drop of water so small would never notice it missing. That drop did not look like much, but on a day when the hive was fighting heat, it may have mattered. So the next time your porch thermometer reads 95, do not look at the empty flowers and assume the story stopped. Look lower. Look toward shade. Look near water. Look at the hive entrance if you have one nearby. Watch for wings that are moving but not flying. Watch for bees standing where the ground is damp. Watch for a beard of bees outside the hive that looks alarming until you understand what it may mean. Watch for the garden to come back alive when the sun starts to fall. Most people think bees disappear in the heat because the day is over, but for the hive, the hard part may have just begun. If this changed how you see bees in hot weather, bee behavior, water for bees, or the hidden work happening inside a hive near your garden, subscribe to the channel. There is much more happening around your flowers than the empty afternoon ever tells you.